Okay, in this tutorial, we're going to talk about the parts of a circle. So first of all, what is a circle? Well, it is the set of all points that are equidistant from a center point. So an example here, if we have a center point here, let's call this center point C. All of the points that make this circle are the same distance away from that point. They're equidistant away. So we could call this circle C. That could be the notation there for you. A radius is a segment whose endpoints are at the center of the circle, and then the other endpoint is on any point on the circle. So that means if this is our center, then our segment has one endpoint on the center, and then the other endpoint could be somewhere on the circle. So it could be here, or over here. And so this is the other endpoint. Let's call it point A, for instance. Then this segment AC is a radius of the circle. So we could just write that as segment AC or CA. A chord is a segment with both endpoints on the circle. So instead of one endpoint being on the center and the other on the circle, this is a situation where you would have both endpoints on the actual circle. So this right here could be an example of a chord. And again, a chord is a segment, so when we name it, let's say if this is J and this is K, then this segment JK is a chord of the circle. Now, a very specific chord is a chord that passes through the center, and we would call that a diameter. So both of its endpoints would still be on the circle, it would just pass through the center. So if this is our center, C, then a diameter would be a segment that goes through the center and has both endpoints on that circle. So let's say if this is endpoint A and this is endpoint B, then segment AB would be a diameter of the circle. So again, this is also a chord. AB is a chord. It's just a very specific type of chord that we would more specifically call a diameter. Secant. Secant is a line that intersects the circle at 2 points. So think about a line means that it continues forever. It's not a segment this time. So a line would have arrows on the end. And we can see that this line has intersected the circle here and here. So if this was the point M and this was the point N, then we could say that line MN is a secant of the circle. Now, technically, it doesn't necessarily have to be a line, but the key here is that whatever it is, whether it's a ray or a segment, it has to extend beyond the circle. So, for instance, if you had a segment, it would have to be a segment that looks something like this, where the endpoints, it would extend beyond the circle. So here are the two endpoints, but here are the 2 points where it actually intersects the circle. So it's different than a chord. A chord is a segment where the endpoints lie on the circle. So to be considered a secant, it has to extend beyond the circle. A tangent is a line that intersects a circle at exactly 1 point. So a secant is at exactly 2 points, a tangent is at exactly 1. So when we would draw this in, it would look something like this. So here we have a line, and we can see that it intersects the circle at just 1 point right here. So let's call that point P. So you could say, let's for instance say that if this is line MN, so MN would be the line that is considered the tangent, and the point P is where it intersects the circle. And this point is actually called the point of tangency. So that's the point where the tangent line intersects the circle. So it's really just this point. So we can kind of highlight that in this drawing here, that again, it's just this point right here. So if we would call that P, then anytime you're talking about it, remember when you name a point, you're just using that capital letter. So let's look at an example. So we have this diagram and we want to name these different pieces of information. Some of them will have only one answer, some of them could have multiple answers. So the center is always just the point. So K is equidistant away from all the points on the circle. So K is the center, which we just name with a capital K. Radius, remember this is a segment that has one endpoint on the center and then the other endpoint is somewhere on the circle. So for instance, segment KI would be a radius, as would segment KL. So there's another example there. Or even segment KJ. All of those are radii. So the plural form of radius is radii, R-A-D-I-I. A chord, remember this is a segment with both endpoints on the circle. So for instance, I can see that segment JL, those have endpoints on the circle. So segment JL would be a chord. You could also say that segment JI is a chord, which actually brings us to the next thing, the diameter. Remember, a diameter is just a very special type of chord. It's the chord that crosses through the center. So the diameter would be JI, segment JI. Secant, a secant is, again, a line that intersects the circle at 2 points. So for instance, I can see here this line intersects the circle at point H and at point I. Now, because there's multiple points on this line over here, this point is G, I could name this line in a variety of ways. So I'm going to go ahead and name it line HI. And remember, for a line, you're going to put the arrows on the ends like that. Versus if you notice this line, it only intersects the circle in one point, this point down here, J. So this line is line GJ, and it's a tangent of the circle, and the point of tangency is here at point J.